So welcome everybody. I believe this is our 6th webinar now. I may have lost track since we began the webinar series in March. And thank you to all of you who have come before. Who is here for the first time? Who is a first time to our webinars? Say it, let us know in the chat or raise your hand. Thank you for being here. We have some folks who have been to several, and we always try to touch on different topics and keep it diverse. And today, I know you're all here because we're all thinking about how are we going to teach online? And how is that going to change the way I've been teaching for a short time, for a long time? What are some strategies I can employ to be the most dynamic presenter and educator that I can through a screen? And so that's what we're going to do. And thank you for all those who are here for the first time. I'm grateful to have you. Let me give you a quick background, as I do every time, on our company, on me, and the online resource we'll be teaching from. And then I'll share some resources you can all have after the webinar, and then we'll do some learning together. So my name is Danny Rubin, and I'm talking to you from Virginia Beach, Virginia. Any Virginians? I know several Virginians in this webinar today. Thank you all for being here. And our company is Rubin, and we are a provider of an online curriculum for business communication skills, focusing heavily on student writing skills and speaking skills. More specifically, email skills, phone etiquette, video conference etiquette. And we're going to be talking about some of those skills today that you can apply for your own career and then share. Please, I want you to also share this with your students the next time you are with them. Maybe that's the fall at this point, but we want to share this knowledge down to our students. So that is the background on the company. I am a former television news reporter, and I'm especially excited about today's topic because what I'm going to help you become is a TV reporter of sorts in your own right, teaching you how to look into the camera and hold the audience's attention. We're all going to come out of today feeling a little bit like that reporter in front of the camera with the microphone, conducting and conveying information. So I was a TV reporter for a CBS TV station in Virginia, doing live TV every day on the 5 o'clock news. And I then left that role, went to Washington, D.C., and worked as a consultant and producer for Meet the Press on NBC. Anybody watch Meet the Press on Sundays? I'm sure you've seen it. It's been on TV a million years. So I helped with that show for 3 years, came back to Virginia Beach, and I've worked in a field called public relations, where we help clients with their messaging, their brand, their reputation, getting them on the news in positive ways, putting on events, writing on behalf of clients. And everything that I've learned since that TV news role almost 15 years ago, we have turned into curriculum to help students learn to be their most effective when they are writing and speaking to go after their own opportunities. So that's what I'm sharing with you today, are techniques taken right out of industry, out of journalism, out of what you're watching every day on cable news and local news, and the strategies they're employing to keep you watching, to keep your attention, to convey information that you'll remember and maybe act on. That's what we're going to talk about today, to think of ourselves a little bit differently, because now we're in a different medium and we have to keep people watching. So, and the students, so they stay with us and they hold on to these lessons. So that's the background for what we're going to talk about today. Now, what I'd like to do is share my screen. Let me get my chat back open. And as I always do, I know some folks have seen this a few times. The new ones, it's important that you understand context. Where is this information coming from today? So I've shared my screen and I'm showing you the dashboard, the homepage for our online curriculum, which is called Emerge. And we call it Emerge because we help students to make that turn from being students to young adults and young professionals. So they emerge from instruction more confident and more capable when they're going after their own college and career opportunities. So very quickly, what's in this program? What are we going to teach from today? Our program is driven through showing students templates and guides and examples, letting them observe best practice and then have the chance to practice it themselves. And some of you have these books. Some of you have seen them at conferences, or you have some copies of your own. We provide them digitally to students, and each one is a collection of templates. Wait, how do I write this email? 100 different writing and speaking skills for employability skills, career development. Thank you notes, follow-ups, internship requests, LinkedIn profiles, all kinds of conversations. Wait, how do I promote my business? Writing and speaking skills for entrepreneurship and marketing and public relations. Learning to communicate well about a project or a new business. Wait, how do I lead my team? Writing and speaking skills for leadership and management. Anybody in here who is an advisor to a student organization, CTSO, DECA, HOSA, FBLA, Skills USA, anything at a university, helping students to communicate when they are in charge of the group and communicating out to others. We provide video instruction as well, showing students best practice for communication. And we also provide digital badges, which are becoming more and more important as testing is harder to evaluate. Badges and micro-learning is taking a step forward, and we teach students how to earn micro-credentials like email etiquette. So they can show employers, these are the skills that I possess. You can trust me to communicate on your team underneath your brand. And we cover instructional units that we'll look into a few today as we talk about skills. We cover email etiquette, beginner and advanced, learning how to write effective emails. So important as students know email etiquette as they go through school and go out into the world. Life skills like holding conversations with new people, phone and video etiquette, leaving a voicemail, setting a voicemail, learning how to show etiquette as an audience member even in a video conference. We cover employability skills, networking emails, unforgettable resumes, storytelling cover letters. I know I've talked about this with many of you before, and some of you use this strategy with students, which is incredible. And we're going to talk about the power of telling your story as we get into today's webinar. There's never been a more important time for students and for you to learn to share stories of resilience, how we're all getting through this pandemic together. We're going to talk about that. Learning to write emails for internships and jobs. And also for virtual internships, which is our last webinar. We talked about communicating from a distance with employers to simulate a virtual internship. Learning to write a LinkedIn profile. Learning to prepare in innovative ways for job interviews. We cover entrepreneurship, learning to find a great business idea, writing skills for sales outreach, writing pages of a student portfolio website or a mock student business website, public relations, learning to write a press release, send it to the local newspaper about a big event, writing skills for fundraising, grant application communication, writing a Kickstarter page. And we cover leadership skills, writing as a manager down to the team, writing skills to clients effectively, project management correspondence, public speaking exercises, some of which we're going to talk about today, learning to write reports and summaries to our superiors, our teachers, our employers about work we've done, and exercises designed for student leaders to set agendas, lead meetings, invite guest speakers, write thank you notes. So a big wide array of skills and topics that teachers incorporate to teach students how to communicate well. Now, with that said, as I do every webinar, I want to provide some resources to all of you if you're interested. Let me share my PowerPoint slide. And if you can't see it, let me know, but hopefully you can. And one thing I want to offer right out of the gate is an online presentation checklist. Okay, we always want to give you something tangible from these webinars. This is a checklist you can put right next to your computer before you lead any class session or any instructional session. We're going to talk about making sure you're prepared for the presentation. We're going to talk about these skills in a minute. Posture, lighting, background, what to say and when right before you start talking, and as you're delivering the conversation, your voice, your eye contact, audience engagement, a checklist to keep you top of mind so you're hitting these themes and you're delivering the best possible presentations. Also, for those of you who are new and haven't seen this before, we also put together a lesson plan for email etiquette. Please take a look at the topics on the left. If you haven't requested this yet, I'll tell you in just a minute how to request it. I'd love for you to have it. We teach students how to build out a professional grade email with individual lessons that can be done in the classroom or if they're from at home. 6 to 8 hours of instruction, and they earn a digital badge in email etiquette when they complete the unit. So if you are interested in the online checklist or the email etiquette unit, please type interested, as we always do, interested in the chat with your email address, and we will provide this to you in the coming days after this webinar. So please type interested with your email address, please. and we will send it along. What we like to do is a 5-minute phone call in the coming days to understand your situation, help you use the techniques we're going to talk about to connect them to your own obligations as a teacher. Also, if you'd be interested in having me lead this webinar for your own team when you regather at the end of the summer or into the fall, we can talk about that too. So we can share this information with as many teachers as possible. We will put this on YouTube, but we can also do it live if it makes sense. So please type interested and your email address in the chat. And for the folks who have been here before, you know the routine. The new folks, it's a 5-minute conversation. So we can make this line up the best possible with your own instruction. Okay, so feel free to keep typing that. I want to keep moving, but we'd love to pass those resources along. Also, I always want to have this lined up too. Guess what? Another webinar coming your way. I'm going to keep it rolling even into the summer. For those of you who are still on your email and you still want to learn how to write an exceptional LinkedIn profile. This is for you to use the summer to improve your LinkedIn profile. All the parts, writing out all the parts. It'll be Thursday, June 18th, 12:30 Eastern, so 2 weeks from right now. We're going to put the link to register in the emails in the next day, so look out for that. But please join us on the next webinar in 2 weeks' time on LinkedIn profiles. We'd love to have you there and use the summer to improve your own professional brand, and then you can teach these same skills to students come fall. Okay? All right, get through the administrative stuff. Let's talk about what we're going to do today in our webinar. We're going to hit on 6 different topics. And in these webinars, if you've been here before, we move fast, right? We cover a lot of ground. Want to make this worth everybody's time. Keep it as close to 45 minutes as we can and stay true on that. So we're going to talk about physical presentation techniques first, how it looks, how it feels. We're going to talk about knowing how to go from point A to point B, having a destination in mind when you lead online. We're going to talk about why it's important to have your screens and slides prepared ahead of time. We're going to talk about why it's important to engage students or participants every 2 to 3 minutes as much as possible. Why it's critical to keep pulling them in. We're going to talk about storytelling and why this summer is the ideal time to develop your bucket of stories. I'm going to talk about why. And lastly, we're going to teach your students to be engaging through the camera lens as well, with an activity you could take with you and use once the school year begins. So we're going to cover a lot of territory. Okay, thank you, Gina. We got it. We'll send that along when we're all wrapped up. Thank you so much for asking for that. So let me stop the share first, and I want to just put it back on my screen fully. Okay, let's talk about what's happening right now, what you're looking at right now. I want to ask everybody a question. Right now, do you think I'm sitting down or I'm standing up? What's your guess? You're standing. How did you know I'm standing? How did you know? I didn't tell you. My posture, right? My posture connotes that I'm standing. This is the first tip I want to pass along to you. If you have good health and you can stand for lengths of time, I want you to stand up when you teach virtually. Not only because it shows better posture, it shows confidence, and I promise you, you will speak better. Your words will come out more strongly. You'll have more oomph in your words, in your energy, if you are standing than sitting. When we sit, we slump over. It's out of habit. We all do it. We might spin in our chair. And we have to be mindful that we don't sway with our feet. We want to plant our feet as a TV reporter would do. And nobody's perfect. I move around too. I got to watch myself. But we want to plant our feet. We want to stand up and we want to look right at the students. And we want to deliver it as if we are in the room standing up in front of them. But this time we're doing it obviously in a totally different setting, but they will feel that energy. They will feel that you're standing, and it will make them take you more seriously. because you're standing. That's the first thing I want to pass along. Also, let's talk about the background. In my background, I do my best to have nothing distracting, nothing on the walls that you're trying to read, nothing that looks odd or strange, nobody walking in the background. The lighting is even, and I'm also dressed well. Now, this is going to be a cultural debate because I know we're all at home and we're doing Zooms and Google Meets and Microsoft Teams all day long, and we don't always feel like we have to dress up. And in my opinion, and I'd love to see it in the chat, once we start teaching again, we need to dress up even if we're home. And maybe you were already doing that this spring. We need to maintain that level of professionalism for our students and our school. And if they see that we're not dressed up and that we're in our chairs, that's how they're going to feel the same way. And we need to set the bar for them that even though you're at home and you've been at home many months, you're still in school and you're still having to dedicate yourself to being a young professional and learning how to do that even in these virtual settings. So when it comes to planting our feet, standing, background, one more thing I want to talk about, and this again is right out of Journalism School 101, which I went to. It seems unnatural. We would rather, let's say we have a Zoom chat with 20 students and we can see all of them. It's our instinct to want to look at the students on video. But where should we be placing our eyes? Who can tell me, where should our eyes go? As much as we can the entire time. That's right. That's right. Because when you look into the camera, you look at every single student at the same time, which is frankly impossible in a classroom. But in Zoom, through virtual presentations, you look into the lens, you look at every single person. Right now, I'm looking at all of you at one time. And I know my eye drifts because I'm looking at the chat. And it's okay to look away to keep an eye on things, but we always want to return our eye to the camera because then we are connecting with the student. We're looking right at them. And if they're looking at us, we have that connection and you're doing it simultaneously. It's powerful. So plant our feet, stand up, look into the camera, even lighting, dress well, background is nothing unusual. That's how we begin every class period, every instructional period. It will make everybody watching take us more seriously. Okay, now the next point, and then I'll share my screen again. We'll look at some material. We want to have a plan every class time. There's a difference now. We may have class the same length of time that we do in the regular building, but this is a different environment. This space is different. And we have to have a plan to go from point A to point B and to get to the end of our lesson before we begin. Because it's going to be harder and harder, as you've already experienced this spring, to hold students' attention. And they have to know where you're going to go with that session. So I recommend, just like I just showed you, tell students at the start of that session where you're going to take it. So they are expecting different things to happen. And they are mentally ready for what you're about to do, rather than be sitting here not knowing what's next. It becomes a little disconcerting or a little confusing, or it can drift for the audience if they don't know what's about to happen. So I tell you every time, here's what we're going to do. Here's how much time it's going to take. Here's what you're going to gain from this session. So setting boundaries early and filling it in and being precise will help you maintain that connection with students who are watching you from the other side, because it gives them boundaries and parameters in their own mind. And it's not just that students appreciate this. Anybody of any age and any audience appreciates knowing what's about to come. It allows them to prepare for it and know how much time they should give you their focus. So we want to set boundaries, point A to point B. That's number 2. Now, let me share my screen again. And let's go back to, excuse me, my Zoom screen. Let me get my chat open again. It keeps leaving me. Hold on. One moment, because the chat can be a little finicky. There it is. Okay. Now, I brought you back to the screens that I showed you. Now, what does everybody notice at the top of my screen? Do you see some browser tabs? How many do you see? at the top of my screen right now? Do I just have one browser tab open? I have 4. And I'm asking you these simple questions that you obviously know the answer to for a reason, and I'll get to that in a minute, okay? But I have browser tabs open. Now, why did I do that? There are screens that I want to show you in our presentation, but I'm not going to take the risk when we're in a live environment that what if my internet is slow and the screens don't load? I would rather have the screens already prepared, my PowerPoint slide queued up, my internet browser tabs opened, so that if there is an issue with my internet and things aren't loading, I don't have to worry about it because I already have the screens opened. So my next piece of advice to you is before the class session, have all of your screens opened, have your tabs opened, have everything ready. Don't take the chance you have to open something once you're already in the moment, because we all have been there, and I hope I'm not jinxing myself right now, where internet can be spotty or go out or something can happen. And we don't want to be fumbling with that when we're live. We want to prepare as much as we can before we go live. If you have videos, test them out, test the sound, test your multimedia. Don't leave it to chance, because it may get in your way. It may trip you up. So before you even start talking, these are all things I'm talking about before the class even begins, right? The posture, the stance, the eye contact, point A to point B, your browser tabs. This is all before we get going. So you give yourself the best chance of a successful meeting. This is Nancy asked a good question. I'll stop and answer. You're using Zoom webinar versus Zoom meetings. For crowds of this size, Zoom webinar is better so that you're only looking at me. It's not a million screens, and we can control the dialogue through the chat. For smaller groups, I think Zoom meetings are fine. And I think their breakout function, putting students in small clusters to discuss and collaborate, come back to the main section. If you haven't seen Zoom breakouts, I recommend you look into that. Smaller groups are fine with meetings. In my experience, big groups are much better with webinars. To keep everybody focused on the speaker and the host and communicate in the chat. It works for crowds of this size. Okay, so let's talk about what I have in these different screens that I've set out there to talk about. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is what I've been doing this entire time. What have I been doing every few minutes? I just asked you a question, right, of how many browser tabs I have open. I know you know the answer to that. You all know how to count. Why am I asking questions? Why do I do that? What is the point of asking a question? And what do you do when I ask a question? Keeping us engaged, right? I'm trying my best to keep you from drifting over to Facebook, drifting to your email. I know it's still the work day for many of you. Things are happening. You're getting your phones dinging. People are calling you. I want you to stay with me as much as possible. And if it's tough for you, imagine how tough it is for a 16-year-old, a 22-year-old, a 42-year-old. It doesn't matter how old, but we know attention spans are thin, and they've never been thinner than in virtual instruction. So what I want you to do is start thinking about, how can I ask questions all the time, even if they're obvious? How can I continue to pull students towards me, make them type in or make them answer verbally, make them take an action? Do not let them become too passive for too long. 2 to 3 minutes, ask a question. And you reset their attention every time. Then you can talk, do it again. It seems a little exhausting, but you'll find that rhythm and you'll do the best you can. But this is not the space for a lecture. No longer can we expect students to just listen to us for 45 minutes or an hour. We have to pull them in. So on this page, and I mentioned it on previous webinars, when we talk about networking, we talk about the 6 most powerful words in networking. What do we mean about that? And what does that have to do with asking questions in a teaching situation? We want to be thinking of questions all the time that relate to what we're teaching or what students are saying back to us, so we can keep that back and forth, that interaction going. So we talk about the 6 most powerful words: who, what, when, where, why, and how. And why do you think I would say those are the 6 best words to use in networking? What does it mean? If I'm using those words, what am I doing? There I go again, asking a question, right? It's been 2 minutes, right? I'm just putting it all in front of you. All the secrets, right? Behind the curtain. I'm asking questions to make the other person, that's right, Jessica, to make the other person talk. Okay, so in this page, we give examples of questions you can use to help students if they're having a networking conversation. You know, who are some of your clients? What kind of projects are you working on? When did you decide to focus on that aspect of your career? Where do you go most often for work? Do you travel? Why did you decide to pursue a master's degree? How did you start your own business? What was the process? So we teach this to students to learn how to hold back and forth conversation. People love to talk about themselves. That's right, Ariel. People love to talk about themselves. One, even students who seem like they're really bored, you get them talking about themselves or showing off that they know the answer, and you know you can get them back with you. So I want you to think about how to incorporate questions and answers, not just at the end of a lesson, but throughout the lesson. And I would also be open to, if a student says something that interests you or types something that interests you, have a Q&A with that one person as you would do in the classroom. Have that back and forth. Ask them some questions. Everyone else will be watching. The act of asking one person a question, everyone else will watch too, because something's happening. There's a back and forth. So even if it's not a question to everybody every time, it could be to one student. And you could ask that question every time. Okay, so keep the questions at the front of your mind, because that is, aside from standing up, looking into the camera and holding your position, asking questions is the most effective technique you will have in your toolkit to keep them with you for the amount of time that they have to be with you or you want them to be with you. Okay, so now let's hop over to the next topic, which is the bucket of stories. Okay, let me just stop and say I had a couple questions here. Just came to me, not the group, but it says, what if the presentation is pre-recorded and not live? Well, obviously, if they're watching something that's pre-recorded, then you're not talking to them in real time. But I would think about incorporating questions that, even if you're recording yourself to show them later, add questions into your pre-recorded and say, I want you to stop and I want you to answer the question right now that I'm asking you. And then hit pause and then play once you've answered that question. You've typed it out or you've written it down or whatever you're going to do. Incorporate questions into your pre-recorded. Will they always do it? Maybe, maybe not. But you give yourself the best chance, so it's not just this 25, 30 minute they're watching with no break, no pause. You're sort of throwing water on their face every few minutes saying, oh, I got to do something now. So think about it that way too, live or pre-recorded. All right, let's switch to our next topic. And I tell you, I like to go fast because I want to finish on time and I want to leave time for Q&A. A huge part of our program and my beliefs as a journalist first and teaching these skills is storytelling. Stories are so huge. And I've mentioned this to some people over the past week as we're talking and thinking about next year. This coming year, there's no better time for a student to learn to share examples of their resilience than right now. I'm sure we could talk all day about what your students have been going through as they are managing their education from home. Raise your hand if one of your students has had to take a job to help make money for their family. I'm seeing hands go up big time. Or the family has one internet hotspot and they all have to share it. The hands are flying. Listen to me. Your students are going through hell right now. This is challenging. And if they do not learn to share their story in college applications, scholarship applications, job applications of what they are doing to fight through and keep learning, this is the moment. This is the moment where stories become a huge part of education, more than ever. And I want you to take this mindset into the classroom, virtually or in person, that it's time to share stories of resilience, of times we worked hard, of times we figured out through a difficult circumstance, how to overcome the odds. I want to tell you, I have a question. Can I tell everybody a quick story? Can someone give me are you interested? Can I tell you a quick, good story real quick? You mind if I tell you something? All right. Thank you. And when you say that to students, I promise you, they go like this. They're about to hear a story and they zoom in and they're ready for the story. Let me tell you a quick story and I'll talk about story strategy. That's right, Emily, I see what you did there. I want you to say that exactly what I said. Can I tell everybody a story? And they'll go, what's the story? Right? Okay. I am 1 week out of graduate school, just graduated from University of Maryland with a master's in broadcast journalism. I landed an informational interview with the news director of the CBS TV station in my hometown, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Virginia. I went in there expecting him to give me recommendations of smaller cities I could go to for my first job. And I go in there and show him the little reel I put together from college. And he rips it apart. You're not doing this right. You're messing this up. You got to work on this. You got to work on that. I said, I know. I wanted to come here just to, get to know you, give me your thoughts, maybe recommend somewhere I should go. Then he takes a pause and he looks out into the newsroom and he looks back at me and I'm sitting there. I'm 23 years old. My first interview for a job ever after college. And he says, do you have ice water in your veins? And I said, I sure do. Meanwhile, my knees are shaking, right? I'm like, what is about to happen? And he says, well, one of our reporters is out sick today, and we have to cover a deployment of a submarine at the naval base. Why don't you go and do that story? And if it's good, maybe we'll use it. I said, okay, let's do it. But guess what do you think I was wearing that day? What do you think I came dressed in for that informational interview 1 week out of grad school? What was I wearing? Oh, you better believe it, right? Did I expect that to happen? No. But was I dressed for the part? Yes. So I ran out the door with a cameraman. We went to the naval base, took all my school training, did the best I could, came back to the station, put the story together. It's 4 o'clock. The news comes on at 5. The news director pops in the editing room, looks at it, and he says, okay, we're going to put it on the air. So that night, I was on the news doing a story. I didn't even work there. I wasn't even an employee. It was probably some sort of legal violation that I was even doing that. Nevertheless, I did that for 3 weeks, 1-day trials for 3 weeks. Then I was hired as a full-time reporter for 2 years. And I tell you that story because I want us to think about our own stories of working through challenges, rising to the occasion. I want you to think about the stories that you have in your own life, personally, professionally. I want you to start gathering those stories. And I want you to go online this summer, find other stories of resilience. And I want you to be prepared to share those stories throughout the year, especially in the early fall when we're going to be having a tough time getting going again. I want you to make a bucket of stories over the summer that you can draw upon, because if you can combine asking great questions with telling great stories and looking them in the eye, you will be the most engaging online instructor at your school, as promised in the title of this webinar. You will be. And it's not for fireworks and flashing lights and all kinds of fancy effects. It's because of your approach. And you are teaching them in a way that is engaging and exciting. And D. Strauss had said, I want to be entertaining. That is how you be entertaining, by telling great stories and making them a participant in the learning, not just a passive absorber of the learning. And so one of the topics in our program is we talk about helping students to generate their 3 stories. And Angela, can you please share that again? But type in, make sure everybody, all panelists and attendees, and then comments, we can all see what you're saying. And she says, stories stick and facts fade. That's true. You never forget a good story, ever, ever. I hope you remember the one I just told you. It's a good one, and it's true. And it helped define my career. So we want students to prepare their own stories too. So you're going to prepare stories. You're going to teach them to prepare their own. And we have a part of our program called My 3 Stories, where students learn to prepare 2 stories about times they rose to the occasion and 1 that demonstrates their work ethic. Or I'm sorry, that demonstrates their who they are in their personal life. So dealing with a fire alarm situation is our example of a big event. The fire alarm went off and the person had to navigate people in and out of the building. The sick day, somebody was on a team and 2 members of the team got sick and they had to do the work for those team members, but they all got it done. And then a funny story from a camping trip. And we want students to think about stories too. You're going to prepare stories this summer. Your students could prepare them too, or they can start thinking about stories as they go into the fall, because it's going to make you a better instructor and it's going to make them more competitive for opportunities, because we are way past the day when students can write applications in which they say, I'm dedicated, I'm hardworking, I have worked really hard over the past year. If they don't give examples of why, the reader will not believe them, the reader will not select them. We have to empower students to understand you are only as strong as the stories you tell. The adjectives won't cut it. 2020, 2021 is the year of resilience. I just branded it that way. And it's true. So start with yourself, dig deep, find your stories, find more online, find more through other media, and then impart that idea to the students as you teach with them. And we're all going to be better off for it, because there are going to be some movies made, some books written out of what we're going through right now. You know it. There are people writing screenplays about COVID-19 right now, because it will be one of the most defining stories any of us ever tell. So now is the time. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about before we do a Q&A is I always want to, wrap up and have some time for discussion. And Nancy, to your question, I do have an outline right next to my computer. That's something else to maybe talk about. This whole time, I've had an outline next to my computer with some bullet notes of things I want to talk about. So I keep myself going. Thank you for asking that, because I do want to share everything that I'm doing. I have an outline next to me so I don't forget to hit certain things. But as you see, I'm not looking down at my notes all the time. I'm looking at you. So I'm not constantly looking at notes and fumbling through notes. I'm just keeping myself top of mind. Oh yeah, I want to talk about that next. So think about that too. Your checklist over here of the things that you want to talk about, the how to stand, how to speak, and then be on the other side, a list of things you want to make sure you hit on so you don't forget. Because students can't see your notes. You can't see mine until I showed them to you. And even if they did see your notes, so what? Wouldn't you rather see that people are over-prepared than under-prepared? I don't care that you see this. I'm not trying to hide it from you. I want you to know. I want to show you what I'm doing so you can do it too. And do what I do even better, because nobody's perfect. I'm giving you the best I know from where I stand. Let's talk about the last topic, which is teaching students to be engaging too. Teaching students to, when they're looking into that lens, to be the most dynamic they can be. And guess what? We're talking about stories again. Combining video etiquette, job interviews, and stories all in one exercise. So here's what we're going to do. Let's say the student is by themselves, which may happen. They're going to sit down in front of the computer, turn on the camera, look at themselves. And you can give them the same checklist that I'm giving you, you can give to the students. And make sure they're working through mentally, does my background look good? Am I standing up? Am I giving eye contact? How's my voice? Or they may find a partner. If you're in the classroom, I hope they are, they can have a partner. And one sits in front of the camera and one is sitting right off the camera. All right? Then we're going to check to make sure the audio works, that we have good lighting. We don't want to be in shadow. Then if you're by yourself, ask yourself, why are you interested in this position at our company? A mock interview where you're asking the question as if you're the boss. Or if you have a partner, they ask you the question and you hear them, but you're looking right into that lens, right? Where do we say to look? Into that lens. Then the student's going to look into that camera and answer with one of their stories of success and resilience. They're going to look into the camera and give that answer, record that answer. And they're going to save it. And they're going to show it to you and show you that they know how to lead dynamic virtual sessions as well. What does everybody think of that idea? Do you think you could do that even if students are home? You could have them practice how to do this and how to learn to be engaging, tell a story, do all of that at one time. They learn so many lessons in just a 20, 30-minute window. And then you could have them come back to a group, a Zoom meeting, for instance, and then they could all share their videos, share their stories. Students can sit next to each other all year. and have no idea what everybody else is going through. This is a time for everyone to know in their own home life, their own personal life, what are they dealing with? What are they going through? It'll make all of us closer together, more connected if we share those stories. So bring them back to the circle, share stories together, hear from each other, validate each other, and then help them to learn how to use those stories to advance themselves, to go after opportunities and say, you have to share how you are juggling having a job and taking care of your family and going to school. You have to let people know, or they'll never know, and they'll judge you. And I've been thinking a lot about it over the past week. I'm not going to make this a political conversation, but for me, a big part of all this instruction is so students are not judged on their background, their race, their gender, anything that people would look at on the surface. They should be judged on their character, and they should be judged on their ability to fight through. If you believe in that with me, can you raise your hand? If you believe students should be judged based on what's in here and not what's out here, as we're seeing in the news right now, a great way, and I'm seeing a million hands being raised, and that is so inspiring, because we want students who are feeling down right now and are feeling like the world doesn't care. We want them to know that they can go anywhere they want, do anything they want, if they can conduct themselves professionally and tell their story. And this is the moment right now. So think about how you're teaching now as a storyteller, as much as you are a virtual presenter, and you're going to make students feel that same way about themselves, that even though they're feeling disconnected, maybe depressed, maybe like this is just too hard, they have it in them. Just the fact that they got out of bed and got to the class session to talk with you, that's enough right now to go out there and tell the world, I'm still here and I still have value and I'm going to do great things. This virus is not going to define me. What's going on in the news right now is not going to define me. That's as far as I'm going to go on that topic, but I don't want to be tone deaf to it. All right. As we wrap up, I want to touch on this one more time for those who came late. Hopefully you can still see my screen. We have a free online presentation checklist for getting yourself ready every time to lead a virtual session. If you have not already requested it, we also have this checklist is free, of course. Also an email etiquette lesson plan to help students learn to write proper emails. It is a foundational skill. Every student deserves to know how to write an email. They should not lose out on opportunities because they cannot put an email together because nobody stopped to show them. That's not fair. Everyone deserves that chance. So if you'd like either one of these items, please type interested in the chat with your email address. As always, we like to have a 5-minute call to say hello, help you make sense of this material in your own world. And if you're interested in having this presentation for your own group later this summer into the fall, we can talk about that too. And also for those who missed it, feel free to type interested. I want to get to the next slide. For those who missed it as well, our next webinar, I know we're heading into summer and we want to check out, but please make 45 minutes for this one, how to write an exceptional LinkedIn profile. Thursday, June 18th, 12:30 Eastern. If you're going to come to that session or you'd like to, can you raise your hand and show me? I'd like to see if we have some folks who will come to that. Awesome. Learn these skills, share them with students. Let's keep passing the knowledge on. Let's not take the summer off completely. I know we want to take breaks and I'm with you, but let's keep learning. Learn a little bit every day. All right, we hit 1:15. I'd love to hang around another 3-4 minutes for any questions. I probably missed some. I apologize, but Audrey says, what is a break? Exactly. So, tell me, what questions do you have? What questions, if I didn't answer, if I missed it, please ask it again. How long do you recommend for a lesson? Great question. I've been careful with these webinars. I say they're 45 minutes and I keep to 45 minutes. What time is it right now? This is 45 minutes on the nose from when we started. I think that 45 minutes is a great length of time. If you keep it moving, keep it engaging, that's a great window. I think 20, 30 is a little too short. I think 1 hour, hour and 15, you start pushing it. I think 45 is that middle ground. And honestly, if I had said to you for the webinar, we're going to do a 1 hour webinar, you're probably like, I don't know if I have an hour, but 45 minutes, I could do 45 minutes. And because you know, if you've been here before, that I'm going to stick to that, then you know that I'm good for it. And I'm not going to abuse your time. So I love 45 minutes. I think it feels right when you're offering it out. And it feels like the right length of time so that you're getting a lot in, but right before someone's about to like, I gotta leave, or I'm kind of done listening, as good as you may have been, you're done. That's right. That was a fast-paced 45 minutes, and we always make them fast-paced 45 minutes. Somebody asked, I think I saw this, the 3 worst things that someone can do in a webinar. Well, it sort of is the opposite of what I've been saying. One of the worst things you could do is to just talk and talk and talk and not respect your audience. Number 1 rule of public speaking, respect your audience above all else. One, with what you're talking about. You know, you're all here today because you want to learn how to do this better. So I'm giving you something that's relevant for you, 1, and I'm respecting your time and attention. I'm making the learning and the space we share meaningful. I'm not acting like I'm the teacher. You have to listen to me. I don't care if you're paying attention or not. We have to think about valuing the time. And we know students can be reached if they feel respected most of the time. So that's one of the worst things you can do, is just to talk and talk, to be unaware of the audience, not minding them. How many of us have been in I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of hands here. How many of us have sat in a keynote address in a big conference hall and the person's talking and everybody's on their phone? See some hands on that? Like, you could look down the rows and Joan says, and you couldn't see that, held prisoner. Absolutely. Everybody's like, I'm here because I have to be here, but I don't want to be here. And we don't want students to think that. We want to think that this is a special time within the class with you, and you're going to make it special because you've thought it through, and you're going to keep them off their phone as much as you can. And you don't want them to feel like they're held prisoner. I hope that none of you felt like that today. I hope you felt like this was time well spent, and not that this was like a burden to have to like, when is this guy going to wrap it up, which I am in just a moment as promised. But we really, really want to just respect the people we're talking to. Lisa asked, nobody else could see. Yes, I do presentations for conferences. I used to do lots of presentations at conferences up until March. So yeah, when conferences resume, certainly let me know, because I would love to actually see people again and talk to them in a room, because that's really fun too. I love doing it at conferences, and it's a challenge to me. Take a big room, 200, 300, 500 people, and keep them looking at me the entire time, because it's a different approach than if it's 30 and you can walk around and have a little, talk to people. When it's a big room, that's a special challenge to me. Can I keep you watching me the whole time? When it's a big room, that is the ultimate test. All right, any last questions here? We'll give maybe 1 more minute, and then we will wrap it up. I'll head back to the screen. I thank everybody again for being here. This is so grateful for your time. These webinars have exceeded my expectations with interest and attendance, and getting to know so many of you, reconnecting with many of you I've met in the past. I appreciate it. I know your time is valuable. You have a lot in your world, and I hope that this was worthwhile for you. And for so many of you who requested material, I look forward to talking in the coming days. When you see it come through as a Google invite, please just click yes or respond with a different time. We can always adjust it, but look out for that in the coming 24 hours. And we will also send the webinar recording in the next day, probably tomorrow morning. So look out for that as well. Share that with colleagues. And hopefully we'll see all of you at our next webinar, June 18th, on LinkedIn profiles. So thank you again, everyone. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time.